Katie Allen is a paediatrician and the Liberal member for Higgins. She joins me now. Katie, thank you very much for your time.
Good afternoon, Chris. How are you?
I'm very, very well. Did the Herald Sun get their conclusions about Dan's roadmap out of lockdown right when they called it on the front page today hopeless?
Look, I have to say the sense of despair is very palpable here in Higgins, and I know people were looking for a real sense of hope. We've been rolling out this COVID vaccine at speed. We're getting to the 70 to 80% mark across Australia, and people are looking for a sense of hope from their leaders, a sense of surety and certainty that the point of the vaccine rollout was to bring COVID to its knees so that we could look at lockdowns as a thing of the past. And people had this tiny dose of easing of restrictions, which has just really fueled the despondency. I think people are feeling, well, is this guy going to really help open up Australia? And that is what people are feeling here in Melbourne.
So the fact of the matter is that daily infection rates are double that of Victoria at the moment. And there was Dan presenting something that even the reporters at the press conference today were wondering, well, hang on a minute, this is way more conservative than what New South Wales is suggesting. This is how he replied to that question.
People can make all sorts of comparisons. You can compare us with other parts of the world. You can compare us with Sydney, vice versa. That's all fine. People are free to do that. What I'm not free to do, though, is to ignore the advice I get. And the advice is that this is not everything everybody wants when they want it, but it's not possible for us to go faster than that at this time.
I simply can't believe that a curfew stays in place for the next 5 weeks, a useless curfew that almost all epidemiologists that I've spoken to have said there's no data behind that.
Absolutely. There is no data behind curfews being for a health orders reason. In fact, the Premier himself has said it's really because he wants the police to be able to police the situation. So in my view, what you can see is a very different ideological approach to these public health measures. COVID is the same across Australia. The health advice is actually pretty consistent, which is there are some things that we know that work, some things that we're not absolutely sure about. But we see over and over again in Victoria, it's kind of like we'll see you and we'll double when it comes to restrictions. Now, what is interesting is there's a lighter lockdown in New South Wales, and there's not a massive difference in the COVID numbers. In fact, they seem to be rising more quickly in Victoria. So it suggests that there is an overuse of restrictions. And what I'd like to see is a bit more consistency across the states. I think it'd be better if the premiers could agree and work together instead of this sort of competitive rivalry. And what I'd like to see is a little bit more certainty and consistency about measures, particularly for small businesses. I'm hearing from people in Higgins, they cannot understand why local retail shops with the COVID-safe measures of a certain number of customers and COVID-safe environment, why they can't open the retail sector again like they are doing in New South Wales. I mean, if you go to the supermarkets, there's no caps on how many people can go to a supermarket, and yet you can't go into a shop that might have 4 people in there. People can be very careful with masks and hand hygiene and QR codes. So there's these inconsistencies which are frustrating people. And it does feel like he cares more about restriction of freedoms than about working with businesses, with small businesses, with the community, with the citizens themselves, and trusting us that we want Victoria and Australia to win. We want to keep the COVID numbers down, to trust that we will do the right thing. And of course, there will always be the exceptions to those rules. And of course, we want to make sure that the vast majority of people who are doing the right thing, who are getting the double jab, who are following the public health measures, give them some hope. But, it's very hard to understand why some of these restrictions have been put in place.
Yeah, without doubt.
And you can see this sort of one-size-fits-all approach we have in Victoria versus the targeted, thoughtful approach that we see in New South Wales.
Yeah,